The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program host and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by TCN TV Network Incorporated. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. The TCN TV Network claims no rights to the said content. TCN TV Network cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. TCN TV Network is a messenger and sharer of information and strives to verify but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this program.
About you, but through Christ I can do all. Stand up tall with my left foot, post up on the wall. Easy if we fall in the streets, life can get hard. Streets used to be a lot different from what man recall. Me a aim for my post like a soccer ball. Still run the road that don't need a map at all. Babylon them want to hold me with a strap at all. But man a lion, me no Cancer nor Capricorn.
Though they want to see me fall, I'm gonna be okay. Though my back's against the wall, I'm gonna be okay. They fighting me now, I'm gonna be okay. Jehovah eyes are watching me now, I'm gonna be okay. Crying out, but I see no one trying to help me. Still upset with the cards that God dealt me. Thought I got over, but I'm back in the same place. Same hurt, same anger, same screw face. Forget but can't forget when memory is constant. Pain from the past, keep holding us hostage. Playing the monsters, so many losses, so many crosses. When faced with evil forces, trying to boss us, ready to cross us. Can't move on, cause the Red Sea is partless, making me heartless. I thought I divorced this, still trying to toss this. The diagnosis making me nauseous. Haunted by the darkness, but I heard there's a light. A sun to rule by day and the moon by night. But my mind keep playing them tricks on me. Right now I'd rather them stones and them sticks on me. It's like I'm broken and I can't be fixed.
Only one thing that really breaks me down. To live in the past, stay in the past.
Welcome to Hope in the Six. I'm your host, Eddie Martinez, and today we have a lovely guest, Donna Alexander. How are you?
I am good.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Today our topic of discussion is you are not your illness. So can you tell the audience a bit about yourself?
So my name is Donna Alexander. I'm a social worker specializing in addiction and mental health. And I work primarily with Black youth, 13 to 29, that are experiencing mental illness.
Yes.
And addiction, really, substance dependence.
Okay.
So I provide treatment and support to them in all aspects. So basically, that's what I do in my day job.
All right. So today we're going to get really deep into mental health, you know, and the separating that identity from the person, because you are not your illness. So even saying that, can you elaborate on that? You are not your illness. What does that mean? What, you know, to you or?
Well, there's a lot of stigma in the community, right, about mental health, mental illness, a lot of confusion about, right? So, for example, the term we use, a person is schizophrenic. Well, the person is not schizophrenic. Person has been diagnosed with schizophrenia and they're living with schizophrenia, right? So you see the difference, right?
Yes.
Right?
Makes sense.
Right away, right?
Right away, yes.
Right, because, you know, mental illness is just like any other illness, right? But it's less stigmatizing, for example, if it's high blood pressure or cancer or hyperthyroidism or something like that, right? But when it comes to mental illness, you know, this is why there's so much shame and secrecy around it, right? Because people tend to identify, to take on, you know, some people think, well, if you're experiencing depression or anxiety or anything, then that becomes central to your identity, when it doesn't, right? When that's just something you might be experiencing at a moment in time, right? And it's just a part of who you are, right? It's not the total sum of who you are.
Okay,
right?
so this is something that we could now educate the people or the masses to understand that they're not that's not who they are.
Yes, just because you're experiencing mental illness, right? That you don't have to take on the identity. It doesn't have to define who you are. It doesn't have to limit who you are, right? Because if you're experiencing mental illness, then it's possible to be treated, to be effectively treated, and to recover and to move on and to live a meaningful, productive life in spite of a diagnosis of mental illness.
Okay.
Right?
Yes. Right. That's very awesome.
Yes.
So we have you work predominantly with the Black population.
I work predominantly right now with Black youth.
Okay.
I work in what's called an ethno-specific program for Black youth.
Okay.
First of its kind, the only one of its kind that we know of.
Right.
That has services that are geared specifically to meet the needs of Black youth.
Okay, so can we talk about what are the needs of Black youth?
So the need of Black youth are services that are first of all Afrocentric, right?
Okay.
Because we're dominated by Eurocentric values, right?
All right.
So when we talk about providing services for Black youth, first of all, it has to be from an Afrocentric framework, right?
That's right. Right.
Because we cannot do things from a Eurocentric point of view because it doesn't work for us, right? The perspective of being an African person has to be central to providing services to these youth, right?
Right.
So it has to be where services are provided Afrocentric with a cultural lens, right? Because you talk about Black youth right now that are dealing with the racial, the cultural erosion, right? The racial, in terms of the identity. When you're a Black youth growing up or living in a majority population where you don't see yourself reflected. Remember, we're only in Canada. We're only less than 3% of the population.
Okay.
It does something to you when you're a minority that grew up in a majority population where you don't often see yourself reflected in a positive light, and most of the time you see yourself reflected negatively. Right. So there is a lot of racial stuff in terms of Black youth not being clear, not being proud of their racial identity.
Would it be safe to say there's a racial insensitivity to some degree?
Yes,
right.
that Black youth live with. And this is what we talk about. If you live in a culture like this, it's quite possible that you're dealing with the racial identity issues.
Right. Yes.
You're Black, but you don't want to be Black.
Right.
Because all your experiences so far have been negative as a result of your Blackness, right? And the cultural erosion that comes with that, right? Because how do you be proud culturally if all around your culture is not represented as being positive, right? So there is some cultural erosion that goes on after a period of time, right? Then we also talk about the trauma. We're just now starting to talk about racial trauma, right? The trauma that comes as a result of racism and oppression, because the systems for Black youth are all oppressive, right? When we talk about every single system, right? Talk about the educational system, we're talking about a system where less than 8% of children are Black, but the dropout, the expulsion rate and the suspension rate are 31%. We talk about the child welfare system, we're talking about the same thing, right? Less than 8%, but 41% represented within the child welfare system. Right? When we talk about the criminal justice system, don't get me started.
I want to get
don't get me started, my brother. Don't get me started.
I want you to get you started because that's what we deal with. We deal with youth that are in youth and adults that are in the justice system, and in the whole program we deal with offenders, right? So predominantly they are Black, majority of them, right? And they over racialized in the justice system. So then we want to figure out what is the problem. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a problem, and like I'm an artist. The first song we just played in that video was me singing. You know what I mean? But there's a struggle on both sides for us. Meaning there's an external ignorance, lack of knowledge, and compassion, empathy, all these things. And then there is a fight within our own. Meaning ignorance. Ignorance is a problem, right? So growing up African culture or Caribbean culture, there is an ignorance to that external treatment, meaning like, oh, you don't need, just go sit down, or you know what I'm saying? What y'all cry for, and insensitivity to the emotional state that we are feeling, even within our own environment. So that's another problem too. So in the capacity that you work, how do you now give knowledge to like both sides, like, but not even both sides, morally in the family dynamics of like a Black person or whatever. Now, how do you like relate to the parents or whatever the sensitivity to this mental crisis?
Illness.
Yes.
It's been I have to say, when I first started 15 years ago, there's been a shift. A lot more black families are
Yes.
more receptive to the idea, right?
Yes.
To the reality,
Right.
that their children are experiencing mental illness. And they're more receptive now to accessing resources, to accessing support, counseling, treatment, right? But, you know, we have to be honest and say that there's a reason why.
Yes,
There's
yes.
a reason why this stigma exists within the black community
Okay.
when it comes to mental illness, right? I mean, years ago, for example, when people were mentally ill, what did we do with them? We isolate them. We put them in asylum. We separate them from the rest of society, right? And so over a period of time, people know that, you know, when you have a family member that's sick, that's mentally ill, that there were no effective treatment, right? So you just lock them away, they're
Cast away.
isolated,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And so that's why people start to hide, and everything was now shrouded in secrecy, right? Times are slowly shifting where we are now understanding that the treatment for mental illness is so effective, so sophisticated, right? And that people can recover, people can live productive lives, like I said before, right? But in spite of that, you know, like there still exists some misunderstanding when it comes to mental illness, right?
Okay.
Because historically we were taught, right, that whatever happens, we should just tough it out. We should just plug through whatever's happened, right?
Yeah, hang on, hold on, just
yes,
endure.
And we can't deny the influence of church. Religion, right?
Right.
Because for a long time it was thought that, you know what, when a child was experiencing mental illness, what do? We would
Demonize
take
them?
them to the church. Yes.
All right, go ahead.
We would undemonize them.
Well, you know, we got to go to a break,
Yes.
though, but we'll be back. Hoping the 6. Keep watching.
At Benjamin Law, we understand the real cost of personal injuries. As the victim of an accident, you may be the one who's physically hurt, but your main concern is that your family are the ones who will pay the price. Benjamin Law will be there for you, helping, supporting, and working tirelessly to resolve your personal injury case. Call 1-855-899-4878 or visit benjaminlaw.ca and let our family of lawyers help your family.
My name is Trish Curling, and I am an online coach, personal trainer, and yoga teacher, and your new host of Shaping Life, which is all about understanding that we have the ability and the control to take charge of our health and wellness. But we can't do it alone, and I can't wait to sit down with the best in the industry. Please tune in every Friday at 1 p.m. live here on the TCN Network.
I suffered trauma in my life, and so did my son. And when it came time for us to sit down and talk about it and get some help, it became an issue because you have to be culturally competent in order for me to feel safe sharing my deepest secrets and what my fears and you know, being vulnerable. So when it came time to look for a therapist that looked like me, there were none. It was like looking for a unicorn. Like, right. I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist, but it wasn't easily accessible. So I discussed it with my best friend, who also had her bouts with anxiety. And so we decided to do something about it. And I think in the African American community, it's been such a taboo. We really don't take care of our mental. We don't, and we should. We suppress a lot, you know, and it comes off as, and when we do express ourselves, it comes off as rage. Well, we have a lot to be upset about, right? I mean, but not to shun those feelings, but they need to be channeled, or they need to be expressed in a healthy way. And that's because for so long we've been told to pray our problems away. We've been demonized. We've been misdiagnosed. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of trust issues. So I decided to do something about it. And I think the misconception with celebrities and people that you look up to in film and television is that we got it all together just because we have money. Well, money doesn't make your issues go away.
Welcome back to Hope in the 6. I'm your host, Eddie Martinez, and today we have special guest Donna Alexander. Mm-hmm. Yes,
my pleasure to be here.
This is fun. This is a very powerful interview because people need to hear this. Yes. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people are feeling the effects of being marginalized and going through depression, not being understood. So we need to talk about it. And shouts out to Taraji P. Henson, who spoke about it, because she went through her stuff. And I like, you know what I appreciate? I appreciate when celebrities now say, you know what, I'm going to address issues. It's not all about acting. It's not about just rapping and just doing your thing and just getting your money, but giving back to the community, meaning bringing awareness. And what this young lady did was brought awareness to now the masses. You know what I mean? To like, okay, this is what's really going on. And now to pick up before we went to break, and today's topic is you are not your illness. And we talked about being demonized, like, you know, like, oh, him have a demon or bad spirit, or, you know what I'm saying? And I definitely believe in that. I definitely grew up in a spiritual background. I'm a person of faith, you know. I do believe in those things, but I think you have to balance out, you know what I'm saying? Like, so God give us doctors for a reason, right? So we need to be diagnosed. We need to be treated. And the more we neglect it, it becomes to a big problem that we cannot even really handle now. Now it's out of proportion. What do we do now? Then you want to go to the doctor, but it's way past, you know what I'm saying, the early phases where it could have been infiltrated and taken care of.
And you know, to her point as well, right? Like the whole thing, the whole point about praying, right, is because of the influence, you know, the cultural influence of voodoo.
Yes.
Right. Science, all of those things, right? Let's be honest. I mean, you know, that's you know, that's part of the culture, right?
Right.
And so you know, there has been a long history of distrust. As far as the medical community is concerned, right, with our people accessing mental illness, and that's valid because of historically what has happened, right, with people in the medical community in the past when our people were used, you know,
guinea pigs, lab rats,
unethically, right? We all know what happened.
Definitely,
with the
still going today.
You know, right? And so that has influenced a lot, right? And so when Black people, you know, when they have unwillingness to take medication, for example, to treat mental illness, those are valid concerns that has to be addressed. Right?
Yes.
Because it comes from somewhere. So that needs to be addressed as well, right?
Right.
And so now we're starting to have those open, honest conversations. But to her point, right, you know, the whole thing about cultural competence, right? What we don't understand is that cultural factors influences all aspects of care, right? It influences people's decision to access service, whether or not they stay in treatment, and whether or not they follow treatment recommendations. Right? If people are not culturally safe, they just don't engage. Right? And so I think for a long time, I think a lot of people underestimated the importance of accessing service from people who look like us, who we really think and understand, who can relate to what we're going through. Right? And that's been a huge barrier for people, like she was saying. And I'm glad I'm so happy that she mentioned that, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of times when you ask young people, why have you not accessed support before? And they say, you know what? I've accessed support. I just haven't continued. Because I felt that the person that was providing this support, they didn't understand where I was coming from.
Right. So let me ask you something. Because even now, like I grew up callous to certain things. And I feel, I'm a man and I'm tough and all these things, right? So I bore a lot of things as a young person growing up, and that's where I'm at right now. So for me, even counseling, which now I'm coming to find out, okay, it's okay to take it, but it's still a hard thing. Like telling people your problems, relying on, like, I don't grow up like that. So even, you know what I'm saying? Like
we were raised not to hear our dirty laundry. Not to let anybody know, right? So, to be strong and tough, to keep everything a secret, right? Not understanding that this secrecy is actually killing us, right? In the past, right, for example, in terms of suicide, we had a huge cultural that was our cultural protection, right? Or a major protective factor against suicide, for example, was that we didn't believe in suicide, right? Years ago, there was a joke, you know, which is that when a Black person tried to do suicide, to complete suicide, they would jump out of a basement, right? You know, I remember the first time that I heard that. I'm thinking, you know how it is with Black people when they were trying to commit suicide, we jump out of a basement. But how over a period of time, as a result of living here, we lost that cultural protection. And so now the community right now is in crisis, is in a state of crisis, right? The community is traumatized. And the reason why we're traumatized is because we cannot lose so many of our children without being traumatized as a community.
So let me ask you this. So, and I recently looked this up. They said suicide rate is low among the black community compared. It's rising. It's rising now.
It's
but in
rising.
comparison to other races, we don't do that. That's
because
something.
historically we never did that. We had too much cultural protection. We never believed.
So
in
let me
it,
ask you
right?
this now. So
we have lost that, and this is why the suicide rate is increased, right? Because we lost the protection.
Right. But here's the thing, because I deal with a lot of people that have gun charges, murder charges, assault charges, attempted murder charges, and that's the population I deal with. Now, would you say? I mean, his opinion perhaps, because now, for me, growing up as a child, I witnessed somebody sell drugs to my father. You know, that's my story, and that did something for me, like mentally. It mashed me up. You understand what I'm saying? I actually turned to alcohol for a period of time. My mom don't even know. I mean, just finding out. Yeah, mom. You know what I'm saying? So no, I was like stuck on corner store liquor, and in the U.S. they sell it to you underage. They don't care. Until the law starts to crack down. So I used to drink a lot of alcohol, 40 ounces private stock, Sinai's, all the type of beers and alcohol, right? But I was angry. But you know who I was angry at? It wasn't the white man. It wasn't the Latino or anybody that's outside of my skin color. It was my black. So I seen a black man sell my dad drugs. You know what I'm saying? And I was like angry. You know what I'm saying? I never hurted nobody in no great capacity. But I felt like I could murder somebody because of that. You understand what I'm saying? So I was so raged. I think, this is my perspective, and based off of my experience, but it doesn't really tell the story of everyone. But I do think black on black crime, violence, is taken out on each other instead of oneself. So that means instead of me killing myself, 'cause I'm not gonna kill myself, but I possibly could kill somebody else. You understand what I'm saying? So so mentally, and this situation that we're facing with mental illness, I think we're venting. Even though the suicide rate is stepping up, I think we vented in other ways. You understand what I'm saying? So you ever see somebody got brutally shot up or stabbed up, and then like how? I think it's not just. I think it's way beyond the little problems that they have with an individual. I think it's more anger pent up, built up, and it manifests through that. What are your thoughts in regards?
I agree. And most of the young men that I work with, that I've been working with over these years, they have similar experiences, right? It's trauma. It's too much for the mind to bear. So when people experience trauma, like I said, it changes you, right? But trauma is spiritual, it's mental, it's physiological, it's psychological, right? Because trauma have physical symptoms, it have mental symptoms as well, right? But a lot of times with trauma, right, all of the rage becomes internalized, meaning people become angry at themselves, right? And so the alcohol use, the substance use is to cope with these feelings, right? And so that's how people start to use alcohol to cope, right? People don't go for therapy, they don't go for treatment, right? But they think about it. It's, you know what? It's not what happens to us that traumatizes us, right? We are amazing. We're, in terms of, bouncing back, resilience, right? What traumatizes us is the inability to talk about what has happened to us. And this is why talk therapy for generations have always been effective, right? Because just by talking about what has happened to us, that helps us to heal.
Yes, release it.
To recover, right?
Yes.
But imagine you're young, you're 16, 17, 15, something bad has happened. You witness a shooting, you lose one of your brethren, right? You witness a stabbing, right? And all of that you're thinking about. But there is no safe space for you to express it, to show vulnerability, right? To show the hurt, right? You don't talk about it. And the more you don't talk about it, the more you try to suppress it and not to think about it, the more you're consumed by it, right? And then you have to start using weed, or you have to start using alcohol in order to sleep, because now you're getting night terrors. You cannot sleep at night. You lose your appetite. You start to feel a sense of hopelessness, right? And this is what trauma looks like. And now the anger starts to build up, and now there's a hypervigilance, right? All of that as a result of not talking about it.
Right. So we got to go to a break, but this is very powerful, and we are getting somewhere. I hope the audience, who are watching, you can leave a comment or you could call in. But this is so important. We got to go to a break. We will be back. Hoping to 6. You are not your illness.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Welcome back to Hope in the Six. I'm your host, Eddie Martinez, and today we have special guest Donna Alexander. You are not your illness. This is so powerful. At this segment now, we get into where sometimes I'll be on the show with a jumpsuit, orange jumpsuit on, and I read letters from inmates who write me from prison and jail, and I just give them a voice and let people understand, because it's all about mental, the mental condition a person in, and also trying to normalize people as well. People do commit crime, but we all are human beings. We all make mistakes. So I would have a jumpsuit on, and I'm reading their letters. Or I will read a news article from Cell Count. So this Cell Count, it says, for prisoners, ex-prisoners, and their families. So that's what it's for. And now as well, I'm sharing it with the audience. So this particular article I'm going to read, it says, it's really limited my ability to feel. It's really limited my ability to feel. Former inmate recalls time in solitary confinement. You kind of spoke about it too.
Yes.
So this is so good. By Ariel Foreigner, CBC News. Gavin Ennett spent months in an 8 by 10 foot segregation cell at the Egmonton institution, with only a male slot-sized window to view out into the hallway. Sometimes, he said, he went for days without leaving his cell. During that time, his perception of reality changed. After a while, it became more difficult to leave solitary confinement than to go back in. You become so removed from people that being around people almost becomes unbearable, said Annette, who was released from incarceration earlier this year. The federal government is moving to end this practice of solitary confinement in federal prisons. Bill C-83, tabled on October 16th, would establish penitentiary units that could be structured intervention units. The units will house inmates separately while still giving them access to rehabilitation, mental health care, and other programs. Under the new model, inmates who can't be safely managed in the mainstream population would receive interventions and programs tailored to their needs. They would be allowed outside their cells for 4 hours each day, compared to 2 under the current administration segregation model, and would have access to 2 hours a day of meaningful human contact. So this was set out in last year. So hopefully now, I got to look it up, follow up to see now if this actually is a reality now, if it changed. But that's a good proposal. But you see the condition what the person said they were in, like being segregated, and then now coming back, they feel weird.
It does. It's not just feeling weird though.
Go ahead.
It's, we're social beings. We need human contact.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so what it does is it's a really harsh form of punishment. Removal of people, right? Social isolation, right? And so what it does, it creates anxiety.
Right.
Because, you're, after a while, if your world is at 10, 8 by however large a cell is, right? And you're there for a prolonged period of time. Even when you're given the option to leave, right? It's difficult to leave because now open spaces cause you anxiety.
Right.
You start to feel really overwhelmed, right? And so inmates that have been
segregated.
Yes, right. Repeatedly, over and over again, they will say, you know what? When I leave SEG, like just going out, right, interacting was like really overwhelming. My heart would start to pound. I would literally feel as if I was having a heart attack, right? Just the experience of having to go out in an open space, because now you start to get a panic attack, right? just being in open spaces.
Right.
It creates anxiety.
I had a conversation with some people that we have a thing called Real Talk. We talk about with former inmates, and we talk about real life situations and stuff like that. We were talking about like a place where they would go, or where would you go if you had the opportunity? And somebody said, my house is just the best place. That's my safe space. I love home. That's just my, then I said, there's no place like home, like, that the saying. But that was like, instead of saying, I'll go to Jamaica or we'll travel somewhere, they just said home is just like, that's what the best. And then another one talked about being around people that they don't feel comfortable. They feel still institutionalized. When they're home, they do everything exactly the same way when they do it in prison.
Because
like
that's what prison does to you.
And
institutionalize
yeah.
you,
So
right?
how does that now, when it comes to now the incarcerated? Because we're trying to reduce recidivism now. Someone coming out of prison, how do we now? Because it's a mental health issue that we need to address. What are the needs for that individual coming out of prison and facing, like, who did some years and coming back to society, who do not know how to navigate? What are the needs that need to be addressed with that individual psychologically, mentally?
Well, first of all, the mental health needs have to be addressed, right? Like learning, learning and utilizing coping skills, right? For anxiety.
Okay.
Right? To deal with panic attacks, right? Generalized anxiety, right? That has to be a huge thing, right? So you have all the, you know what? I have to say right off the bat that I think mental health is the most important thing in life. I think good mental health is the most important thing in life, right? Because without good mental health, you really have nothing, right? So at all times, if anybody were to ask me, what's the most important thing in your life, I would, without hesitation, say good mental health, right? So I think the mental health aspect have to be treated first. Have to be addressed first, right? Because if that's not addressed first, then the assimilation back into the community is that much harder, right? How are people going to go out to find jobs, to go to interviews, right?
Definitely.
To occupy spaces within the community when they're experiencing social anxiety? How are they supposed to do that, right? How are they supposed to work, to function day to day, work, right? Interacting with people when all of this is creating anxiety. And so at all times, for people that are exiting the system, for me, the most important thing that has to be addressed first is the mental health part of it.
Right.
Because once that is addressed, then they can then move on to meet all their other, goals in terms of integrating back into the community, right? But if the mental health part is not there, they'll end up right back where they started, right back in the institution.
That's
right? And oftentimes this is what happens, because oftentimes the need to access mental health support is often not really fully addressed, because people, say, let's hook you up with a job, let's do all of these things, right?
They're not mentally prepared. So I want to have some questions. I want to put it up on the screen and see if we could address it. These are common quotations or common feeling of individuals. This one says, why do I always feel like I'm not good enough for anyone? You ever heard that one?
Oh, all the time. Okay, so this is the thing, right? A lot of the work that I do is helping you to develop a sense of self, right? Because if your self-esteem, if your self-worth, if your self-love is intact, right?
Yes.
Then you don't have feelings that, okay, you're not good enough for anybody, right? But you have to feel that you're good enough for yourself first. And if you feel as if you're good enough for yourself, then oftentimes it matters less what other people think. You don't crave social acceptance, right? You don't crave the need to fit in. You don't bow to negative peer pressure, right? Because you have a strong sense of self. You know who you are, right?
All right.
You know what you bring to the table.
Okay.
You know you're strong, you're resilient, right?
Okay.
If you love yourself.
Love yourself, all right.
Right?
Yes.
Then you don't internalize all of these things. So a lot of times it's not about the other person. It all has to do with you. And so this is why I do a lot of work in promoting and building a stronger sense of self.
Okay.
Because ultimately that's what matters.
All right, so let me get the next one up. It is easier to fake a smile than have to explain why you are sad, suicidal, depressed, and have anxiety. So it's easier to fake a smile.
It is. It is.
Oh, yeah?
It's easier.
Okay.
Right? Because you know what? The commitment to recovery, the commitment, it's scary.
So then you have a lot of people going around smiling
exactly,
and they're
because you
really
know what?
messed up.
It's fear.
Messed up, yes.
It's the idea of being vulnerable, right? To expose yourself, you know, in order to get support, especially if it's not culturally competent, right? If you feel as if you're going to be judged or rejected, right?
Okay.
Then a lot of people, to avoid that, they just don't bother, right? They don't access counseling or support because they fear all of this, right? Because you have to be vulnerable, right? You have to give up control. And so for people who access service, it's actually very courageous, right? For a lot of times, it's easier to do all of these things than to access support. It's not the best thing to do. Don't confuse me. Don't misunderstand.
Yes,
you know.
I understand.
But a lot of times, I understand
mask.
why people do it, especially for black men.
Okay.
Right, because black men are socialized to be strong.
Right.
You know, all of these things, right? You know it is, my brother. You know the way that the gender role socialization.
Definitely have to be strong and stuff like that.
Right.
But for me,
you cannot
I
show
can't
weakness.
fake a smile though. Like me, like more times my face is screw face and I'm not even angry. Like I just have my face is just serious. You know what I mean? But I think men. That smiling part, because I mean, this is called the screw face capital of the world. Like men, them screw face. That's what I heard. You know what I mean? So is more men you see with screw face. You know what I mean? I even made a song called Smile. You know what I mean? To like, let's just smile. Because a smile changes the dynamic. Even if I see you and I'll give you a nice smile more than it make you feel a little more comfortable. So for men, I think it's probably a little bit harder to smile. But I do know that people do go through this and people do put on a face. People put on a face and a happiness. And what Taraji P. Henson said earlier was that just because you're rich doesn't mean that you know like they don't have the problems don't go away. They're going through. So you have so many people on social media and they're doing wonderful things, but it doesn't mean that they're not going through their own struggles, even, you know, behind the scenes.
But you know the thing though with this social media is that a lot of people, the social media is causing so much distress.
I think so.
I'm telling you, I know, I see it every day. Social media has caused so much distress among people, right? Because people look at all of these fake lives. I mean, and a lot of stuff on social media is fake, right? But people look at it and then they start to compare their situation to what's out there in social media, right? Not knowing that it's fake, right? And then they start to start to affect them mentally. It plays with their head, right? Because after all, there are all of these people out there living all of these beautiful lives. And here I am, I'm not living this life, right? And so
beautiful lies.
Oh yes,
beautiful lies.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
And so this thing with social media, that's a huge thing, right? That we really have to get a handle on this social media thing, right? Especially among young people.
I think they said about that Instagram. They said they're gonna stop showing them the amount of likes because that was like causing them.
Because a lot of people were getting extremely distressed by that, right? Because when you put something up and you don't get likes, then it was starting to affect people.
Right. One writer said, we do it for the love, we don't do it for the likes. I think his name was Chronix, and that's a powerful statement. You know what I mean? Because some people are doing things because they're really passionate. It don't matter who likes it. We're trying to combat what is being out there. Like people showing bad, negative, and all this stuff, but we're trying to show good too. Like, look, this is what's being done. Because if we don't have no knowledge of what's going on, and that's why the show is there to show people what's going on. Because if you have no knowledge, you say it don't exist. But we do got to go to a break. We'll be back. Hoping the 6. You are not your illness. Welcome back to Hope in the 6. I'm your host, Eddie Martinez, and today we have a special, lovely guest, Donna Alexander. And we're wrapping up, but this is so powerful. You are not your illness. And I can't fail to emphasize it anymore. Like you are not your illness. People need to know that. We need to separate it. And also we need to like pry into the root cause. This is something that we're facing. This is something, you said something earlier about proper mental health, like good mental health. What I want to ask you that. What does good mental health look like?
Good mental illness, good mental health, and I should clarify this, does not mean the absence of a diagnosis.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So people could be, there are people out there that do not have a diagnosis, of official formal diagnosis, but they're experiencing some form of mental illness, right? And so, yes, there are this huge clinical explanation, right? But it's really the ability, when we talk about good mental illness, right, we're talking about clinical symptoms, right? So, and then there are all of these different clinical symptoms. So it's the absence of all of those clinical symptoms, right? But it's also the ability to bounce back, right? From trauma and to be resilient, right? So yes, we don't have a formal diagnosis, but we also have the ability to cope, right? So we're not experiencing any clinical symptoms, but in addition to that, we also have good coping skills, and we're able to bounce back to be resilient. Because there always will be something in life, some stressors, some always will happen to us, right?
So how do you bounce back? How do you bounce back? You got fired, or your husband left you, your wife left you, or something like that, and now you're like, oh, you mash up. You're feeling some type of way. How do you now get up, dust yourself off, and move forward?
You access support. And when we talk about support, it doesn't have to be professional support, right?
Right.
When we talk about it, we're talking about the most important thing in people's lives are social connections.
Okay.
Right? That is by far the most important things. Are positive social connections. Positive social connections, right? That's most of the time, this is what we need, a strong social connection, whether it be familial or just good, solid friendships, right? That's a huge component, right? That's relevant, right? So someone who understands us, right? Most of the time, that's what most of us need, right? And the ability to talk, right? To talk openly, right? So most of the time, that promotes resiliency, right? That promotes the ability to bounce back,
yes,
from whatever, right? Because there always will be stressors. We're always going to, relationships end, we lose jobs, right? Things happen, right?
Yes.
But we have to, and you know what? We have to be able to resist. So a lot of the work that I do with young people is teaching them how to resist. Because resistance, like a Koa Benjamin would say, is in our DNA, right? But what does the resistant look like? The resistant does not look like go tell somebody off. The resistance in this case, how do you resist racism? How do you resist stereotypes? How do you resist the low expectations? How do you resist oppression? Right?
Yes.
Because in order to survive and to maintain your mental health, you have to resist all of these things.
Okay.
Because these are the things that you're faced with, right? What does resistance to racism look like? That's the kind of work I do. Okay, well, one young man said to me, oh, I'm at my job, they keep calling me the N-word every day. I said, you have to learn to resist. And we talk about what does resistant look like. Well, resistant look like you need to go back to school, my brother. What have you always wanted to do? Well, this is what I want to do. So how are we going to support you doing that? This is your resistance. You have to resist. So a lot of times, that's the language. Right.
But the word resistant could kind of get the wrong idea, because you got to fight the power of resistance.
Okay, I'm talking. There's sometimes when you got to do that.
Definitely.
There's sometimes, my brother, you got to fight the power. And I'm an activist.
Right.
Anybody who know me by now know that I'm an activist, right?
Yes.
But resistance you can do that. You can do both. It's about place and time, and it's about situation. Like my friend would say, my partner would say, you don't bring a sledge on it. There's certain jobs that require a bulldozer, and there's certain jobs that require a scalpel. And you have to know, how to resist.
Okay, how to resist. So we got to go to Bars for Bars, over to Jason Fresh, Bars for Bars.
What's going on, everybody? This is Jason Fresh, part of the Hope team. This is Bars for Bars, and we got my man Spin.
To all of my boys in the hood, Now that I work with and for you in the hood, I need to explain some things about the work that I do in the hood, because one too many of you is facing criminal charges. And I know that poverty got you living on minimum margins, but I can't spend my work week fighting off these charges, visiting in detention centers from the Roy, much less the Maplehurst. So with that said, I need you to know that I talk to the cops, because at the end of the day, somebody you trust has to. But I didn't write this to preach at the thugs, because at the end of the day, I don't know what you gotta pass through, but I ask you, what about the dumb things assume on you young cats do? I ask you, why you pistol whipping pizza delivery boys that pass through the hood? Why you let the liquor and weed trash you in the hood, catch you in the hood with these quick money scams, got you flashing and more fashion than Henny jamming? Yes, I got a passion for fighting the system. Got much compassion for these hard rocks that don't want to listen, missing the point of these bars that I spit, because maybe your father was missing from the time you sucked on your mamas. So now you practice your mean mug in front of the mirror. You can't accept that a real man does cry, so you seen these cartoon thugs on TV and started to mirror their actions. And some of y'all just tired of being poor and the guns in the hood make crime a fatal attraction. So here I am taking action, praying for bail once more, but you have dared to fail to comply on your record, so the judge is closing the door before I even utter a word. I said it before, breaching probation will eventually slam you on the floor, so don't do it. If you ain't trying to go to jail and you're one of the few that was granted bail, my dude, memorize your bail order, because the hard time you do each time you get booked for fail to comply will only get harder. That's why I beg the youth to grind smarter. I can't knock their hustle unless I put money in their pocket, so I have to barter with my fire starters off stage and with these words in this poem to try to stop these criminal convictions from flowing into your records, not on some goody two-shoes flex, but because when the feds pull you out on the street, they're ready, willing, and able to add points to your score. And there ain't no full court basketball game I'm talking about. It's an I'm unemployed and I can't afford to pay child support pain I'm talking about. It's an I've been out of school for so long I forgot how to read or write shame I'm talking about. It's an I want to quit the drug game but got nothing else mind frame I'm talking about. And I just want to see you moving with clout. I want to see you traveling far beyond the confines of your block or your hood. I want to see you traveling to other countries, and most importantly, I want to see you recover from the absence of a worthless father that still haunts me.
Hope in the 6, y'all.
Shout out to Spin El Poeta. That was bars, man. Snap, snap, snap. So we do a little segment, bars for bars. So now, as you see me read the article, now we have guys out there to shout out those locked up and give them something conscious, like to think about these. So it's bars, lyrical bars for those behind bars. So those are solid words to inspire somebody to do good. You know, we have a lot of people out in the community advocating for young ones and people that find themselves be violating the law in the system over and over. We're there for them. You understand? That's why the show is called Hopes in the 6. We want people like you guys to come on the show and show what people what is being done. This is so empowering for me now, for me, or just be sitting beside you. Imagine the people seeing this now, like, oh my God, these are people that care and understand. And that's why now it's very important now to see somebody that look like them to talk to them about it.
I'm telling you, I just did some work in the federal system, and I went there, and I'm telling you, I was so inspired. Beautiful, articulate black brothers, right? You know,
right,
that are doing their thing. You know, some of them even going to school, getting their degrees, right? And so inspired, right, by some of them, right? And so there's hope, you know.
There's definitely
hope. I wouldn't be doing this job,
right?
If I didn't see the hope and the potential out there, right? And that's what keeps me going every day. This is what inspires and fuels doing this job. Right.
That's powerful. And I mentioned earlier about that my father I seen him take drugs. But as he did his time in prison, he actually graduated college. Like so you can do some stuff. You know what I'm saying? It takes for you to give up or let go. You know what I'm saying? And pick up yourself. It's not a disgrace if you fall and get up. But if you fall and stay there, then it's disgrace. Look at you. But get up. So shout out to those people that are getting up. I have two more clips. I want to read it and talk about it before we leave. You're the reason that I believe you can hate and love someone at the same time. Wow. Briefly give me something about that. What does that mean? Love somebody and hate? Or what is the perspective of that? Loving somebody and hating them at the same time?
Because we're human beings and we're capable of conflicting emotions, right?
Okay.
You know, it's part of our humanness, right?
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
There are all kinds of conflicting emotions abound, right?
Give me the next one.
Yeah.
I may be here, I may seem happy, but I'm mentally gone. I'm dying on the inside.
Yes, I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from youth that have to live double lives, right? Because a part of being a black youth, right? And I say black youth because that's what I know, right?
That's right.
Is sometimes a reality of living a double life.
Yes.
Right? In certain contexts, you have to be a certain way. In another context, I talk about it, the visibility, the invisibility syndrome, right? Where in certain contexts, Black youth are so visible. And in certain contexts, you're so invisible, right? Always have to navigate, right? And always have to deal with a lot of stuff, right? Where they just feel like they're dying inside because they fully cannot share what's going on in their life, not even to their parents, right? Where you have, your life is threatened, all of these things, and you cannot even share it to your parents, right? And you have experienced so much trauma. You're 18, but you have lost 6 or 7 friends. What does that do to you?
Definitely.
The sense of fatalism that, if I live to be 20, I'm not even expecting to live to be 18 or 19 or 21, right? So that's what it means. I hear it so often over there. I feel like I'm literally dying inside, right? Where the depression, the post-traumatic stress syndrome is so much, right? And it's accumulated. And then you couple that with the racial trauma, right? That you have to go through, right? And all of the different systems that are so oppressive. That's why I hear that.
Well, I want to thank you. We could go on for
we could go on all day. I
want to thank you for coming to the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You are not your illness. Separate it. You might be diagnosed with something, but that don't define you. And one more thing that you said is to talk about it.
Yes,
vent it out. Find somebody, whether it's a church, whether it's a counselor, find somebody or a friend that you trust, talk about it. When you let it out, you will feel better, and that's the part of the healing process. Thank you for watching. Hoping the 6 with Donna Alexander, mental health worker. God bless you. Let positivity go viral. Still keep watching. Hoping the 6.